Let's keep working with text, and in this lecture we will learn how to create lists with bullet points and also with numbers. And what I mean by list is basically like a list of bullet points like we have here, and also like an ordered list with numbers like here with 1, 2, 3 ordered elements. All right, so that is very easy to do in HTML. So let's see how. So starting with the numbered list, so this one here, it is here at the end of this section of our text. So in the what is HTML part, so we have this paragraph, then we have this paragraph, and then we actually have another paragraph there that we missed, and then after that we have the list. So let's get all of this content. So these are the 3 list items, and that is the missing paragraph. Okay, just paste all of that here. And now I will simply wrap this element inside of a P. And so there we have the paragraph. So we have everything nicely structured here. And now let's start the list. So the element to start a ordered list, which is what a list with numbers is called, we use the OL element. So like this. And so OL stands for ordered list. And we opened it, so of course we also need to close the element. Okay, now let's give us some space here, because actually for each of the elements of the list, we need to create an element inside of the ordered list. And so for that, we use the LI element, which stands for list item. So list item, open it and close it. And then let's grab this content. So the opening tag, let's cut it actually. Okay, then I'm going to cut these 2 as well and paste them down here. And then simply wrap it inside some more LI elements. So again, LI stands for list item, while OL stands for ordered list. Here I'm giving it some indentation using the tab key, just so that they are visually all aligned as child elements of the ordered list. So maybe you noticed how I'm using the terms child elements and parent elements. So whenever we have an element inside of another, basically the container of another element is the parent. So in this case, that's the ordered list. And then the elements that are inside the parent are the child elements. All right, but let's go back here and reload it. And indeed, there is our ordered list. Nice. So the Google Chrome browser understands our code and knows that it should render it as a list of ordered numbers. So 1, 2, 3. And of course, it then automatically applies these numbers without us having to do anything. And if we added another element, let's say we would even add it here at the beginning, that would then become the first element. Oh, sorry. So that would then, as I was saying, become the first element. And indeed, now we have 4 of them, and this one is the first. But this one we don't want. Let's get rid of it. Nice. So that is one of the lists. And then the other one is this one here in the why should you learn HTML part. And again, there is some other content here. So let's go ahead and grab all of this. So from this content file here. So this is the heading. And now we need all of this. Copy and paste. And so once again, I will start by wrapping these into paragraphs. And so maybe you are starting to see that we are really creating a nice and tidy structure where each piece of content is inside of some element. So we don't have like any text floating around just inside of the body without being in an element, right? We always are creating a nice structure where each element has a certain meaning. So, for example, all of these are, of course, paragraphs, and that's why we use the p element. And this piece of content here is a list, and that's why we use the ordered list element. And so that is essentially to assign some meaning to the content and to structure it in a logical way. And so this then allows web browsers to display it in a way that makes sense. But anyway, now we have this content here, which we want in this kind of list, like bullet points here. And so the element that we use for that is UL. And UL, maybe you can guess, stands for unordered list. All right, let's close it down here. UL. And so an ordered list with the numbers is OL, and the one without numbers, which we say is unordered, because the order of the elements does not matter. So that is then called UL, which stands for unordered list. But then inside of the list itself, we still have to use the LI element for the individual items. So just like before, we need to wrap all of these different pieces of content into an LI element. So we already did that before, so I'm sure you know how to do it. And maybe you saw it coming that this is another very small coding challenge for you. So pause the video now and do exactly the same thing that we did up here. So wrap each of these items in an actual LI element. And so like this, you can keep practicing writing some HTML on your own. Okay, so I hope that was a simple challenge. And so let's quickly do it here. All right. So this one here actually has multiple lines, so it ends here. And you see that the formatting here is completely wrong, but I'm not worrying about that, because for that we have the helper tool of Prettier, right? So Prettier takes care of all our formatting. But hopefully you see that without that formatting, this looks like a complete mess, right? It's very hard to understand. So for example, this element here is not a child element of P, so it should be aligned here. And we could do that manually, of course, simply by deleting this space, but we can also just leave it to Prettier once we save the file. Sorry. And here I'm missing the closing slash. And now, as I was saying, as I save the file, then Prettier does its magic and nicely formatted here our elements. Now we also have this empty paragraph here for some reason. So maybe I did some mistake here earlier. So let's just delete it and save it again. And now, as we come here to our page, then indeed we have our nice unordered list down here. Great. So creating lists is another important part of writing HTML. We use this all the time. And so I hope that you had fun with this lecture, because it was quite an important one. So before you move on, please make sure to review what we just did here, and also think a little bit about some of the things I said earlier, such as the fact that each element has a different meaning, and also that we need to use these elements to structure our content. So we cannot simply just dump all of our text here into the body text and call it a day. So if we did that, there would be no structure and no logic at all. So I just deleted some empty paragraph here, but I just wanted to show you what happens if I select all of this. So copy paste here basically, So if I take it and just paste it down here. So give it a save, and well, you see that it's now all one big blob of text, and HTML doesn't really care about any white space. So any of these line breaks here, they're all irrelevant to HTML. And so if we try to load this, you see that there is no structure at all. So everything is just one huge line of text, and yeah, that's it. There's no structure, there is no meaning, there's nothing, basically. And so I hope that this small example showed you the importance of basically wrapping all pieces of content inside of an element that actually gives that content some meaning. Okay, but with that, I'm leaving you, and I see you soon in the next video. One thing that our blog post is still missing right now is some images. And so let's now learn how to use the HTML image element. So if we check out the demo page, then we notice that here we have two kind of important images. So we have this big image here, which kind of illustrates the blog post. And then we also have this photo here of the author. And so let's now start by incorporating this image here into our blog. So the images are, of course, in our project folder. So they came with the starter files. And the one that we are going to include here is this post image. So you see when you double click, so when you open this file, then VS Code is actually able to display image files without any problems. So we want this image right here after this author. So basically the image serves as a barrier between the beginning of the article and the rest of the page, so the top part. Now, I think that here actually this title here, so this H2 element should be before the author. So let's move that down here. Right, so first, of course, like we have it here, needs to come the actual title, so the heading element, and only then the author, and then this image here. Okay, but anyway, let's now include the image element. So again, right here after this paragraph, we want to include this image. So, just like any other element, we start by writing it like this. But now remember how I actually told you in the first lecture of this section that the image element is a special element. And that's because it doesn't have any content. And therefore, it also doesn't have a closing tag. Instead, what we do is to simply add this slash here at the very end of the element. Now, you might wonder, if we don't specify any content here for this image element, then how will HTML know which element it should display? And that is an excellent question, which brings us to something new in HTML, which are attributes. So attributes are basically pieces of data which we can use to describe elements. So there are lots of different attributes in HTML, and one of them is the source attribute. And so that's the one we are interested in right now. So source goes like this, src, and then an equal, and then we need double quotes like this. And then here we can simply specify the name of the image. So remember that is post image.jpg. And so we just write post image, and we could even allow VS Code to autocomplete that code for us, like by clicking here or going down. And actually that didn't work. But if we just hit enter here, then that would work just fine. So again, we can write it manually or just use VS Code's autocomplete functionality. And that's actually it. That's the very basics that we need in order to display an image. So if we reload this now, you will see that indeed, here it is. Great. So again, let's just quickly recap. We did not specify the image using some content in this element. Instead, what we needed to do was to specify an attribute. And in this case, it's the source attribute. And remember that an attribute is basically like a piece of data, so a piece of information describing this element. So here we are describing the source from which the browser should basically read the image. All right. Now, besides the source attribute, there are other attributes that we can specify for images. And one that we should never skip is the alt attribute. So we write it like this, and alt stands for alternative text. So basically what we need to specify here is some text that should describe what the image is about. And this is very important for various reasons. One of them is that it will allow search engines such as Google Chrome to actually know what is in the image. Because without this description, search engines don't really have a know of knowing what the image is actually about. And second, and probably even more important, is that by specifying the description of the image, we can also allow blind people to use our website. So users who use a screen reader will not see the image, but instead they will have the screen reader read the alternative text, so the description, to them. So never skip this attribute. It's very important to always write a good description. So here let's say that this image here is HTML code on a screen. Okay, now this will not visually change actually what we see here. So let's reload. Unless the image for some reason cannot be found. So let's say that we forgot the G here, for example. And so now this image path is completely wrong. So if we now reload, then the browser will not be able to find the image. But instead, what it will do is to then print our description here. So that's the HTML code on a screen that we gave it here. Okay, so that is actually another use case of the alt text. Let's put it back. And we are actually still not done. So we can specify some more attributes here, which are quite important in this case. So the ones that I mean are the image width and the image height. So right now this image here is a little bit too big. And so let's specify its width to 500 pixels. And don't worry yet about what these 500 pixels mean or exactly what a pixel is. We will talk more about that once we reach the CSS section. But for now, let's just write width and set it to 500. And then let's see. Okay, so now it scaled the image to a width of 500, and it automatically also maintained the aspect ratio of the image. All right, but we can also specify that. So besides the width, we can also specify the height, which should be 200. And I know that because I know the image dimensions. So if we open this up again, you see here that the original image is 1000 by 400. And so if I specify the width as 500, which is just half of 1000, then the height must also be half of 400 here. So that would be 200. Okay, so that should now look the same, and it does. But of course, if I wanted, I could make it a square, for example, which would then completely distort the image just as we see here. Of course, we don't want that. So put it back, and here we go. Great. So this is how we include images into an HTML document. And this one here was only the first one that we wanted. The other image is this author image right here above this author paragraph right here. So the image that we want now is this one, Laura Jones. And we want it with a height and a width of 50 pixels. Okay. So I have another challenge for you. And what I want you to do this time is to include this image that I just showed you on your own right here in this place. Okay, so take a minute and pause the video and include this image with 50 by 50 pixels. And then I'll be back here in a minute with the solution. All right, So hopefully you got some more practice there. So image, and I will immediately start writing the attributes, and I will then in the end close the element. So here we want Laura Jones, and now I will just hit enter or return to autocomplete the file name here. And then the alt text, let's say that this is a head shot of Laura Jones and not Jonas. And a height. And here again, we could now hit enter or return to autocomplete this. But I actually want you to write these attributes by yourself, by hand, so that they get into your head. So that's really important. So a height and a width of 50, and that's it. So let's close the element, give it a save, and then Prettier does this nice job of putting each of these attributes here in one line, which makes it really easy to see. Actually, let's close down our sidebar here. And let's see. And here we go. So here is that picture of Laura Jones now. Okay, well done. Nice progress. So now we know how images work and how attributes work as well. And actually, we can specify attributes also on some other elements in HTML. And one where this is very important is actually the HTML element itself. So here in this HTML element, we should specify the language that we use for this web page, so for this document. And we can do that by saying lang, so specifying the lang attribute. And then in this case, since it is English, we can set it to en. But for other languages, there are other codes. For example, for German, it is probably de, or for Portuguese, it should be pt. And if you have any other language, you can just easily find out the code by Googling. Another thing that we can and actually should do, which needs attributes, is to specify the character set that is used in the document. So that is something that goes into the head because it is a piece of information that describes the document. So here we need another new element. And this is simply called meta, which stands for metadata. So metadata means data about the data. And so here we are describing that the character set, which we describe by this attribute. So we say that the character set should be UTF-8, which basically is all the simple characters that we use in the English language. Now this one here is another of these elements that doesn't have a closing tag, and so we just close it like this. Okay, now I'm not spending a whole lot of time on these elements and on this kind of stuff, because later when you actually build your own pages, then this will all happen automatically. Okay. So this was just to show you that this is just another way or another place in which we need some attributes where we then need to specify a value for it. All right. So UTF-8 here is the value that we specified for this character set attribute. Okay. And yeah, I think that's it for this lecture. So see you in